It is said that even silence can grieve. That stone remembers the ones who touched it, and that sometimes beneath the surface of the sand, a single name waits, not to be spoken aloud, but only to be felt, as one might feel the breath of a ghost, when the night air suddenly turns cold. So listen gently now, and walk slowly. There is something beneath your feet. Far from the Nile, past the fields where papyrus grows like soft green flame, past the crumbled pillars of forgotten temples, beyond even the desert's spoken names, there lies a hill, the color of dried blood. It is a place no maps mention, for the land itself has hidden it with intention. A hush that has settled into the bones of the earth, and beneath that hill, they say, is a tomb, but not a royal one. No golden mask guards its gate. No retinue of carved servants lines its wall. No throne of lapis waits in the stillness. This is not the tomb of a king, but of the man who once wrote their stories. He was called many things in life: scribe, keeper, listener, but those names too have been scattered like dust. His real name, the name his mother whispered to him at birth, the one that the stars might still remember, was never spoken again after his death. He had it erased himself, they say. He inked his own forgetting, but not before he wrote his last scroll, not before he carved one more story into the dark. The tale begins not with his death, but with a sound, a single breath, drawn too deep. In the palace of a dying pharaoh, the young scribe sat beside the bed of the once mighty ruler. Ink stained his hands. His reed pen trembled, for the king, who had ruled with fire, now spoke only in whispers. He was afraid. "Write me a spell," the pharaoh said, voice thinned to wind. "One that will bring me peace beyond the veil." And so the scribe wrote, not in haste, but in sorrow. His tears dropped upon the parchment, softening the ink. They say he did not wipe them away. For this scribe, unlike others before him, had once loved the king, not as a subject loves a ruler, not with loyalty or reverence, but with something quiet and unspoken, something not allowed. He had loved him in silence, from behind the veil of duty, as a shadow loves the shape that casts it. And in that moment, with the pharaoh's last breath brushing against the scribe's cheek, the sorrow broke through. He wrote not one spell, but many. Spells of light and rest. Spells of return. Spells for seeing the beloved in dreams. But none were enough. The pharaoh died. That night, the scribe was not allowed to mourn aloud. He returned to his chambers and began a different kind of work. On papyrus made from his own weaving, with ink drawn from burnt cedar and crushed lapis, he began to write the story of a love that never touched, a devotion so deep it could only be buried. He wrote by night, by moonlight, by the hush between bird song and wind, and each line was carved again into stone, which he hid beneath the floorboards of the temple's storehouse. No one noticed him. He had always been quiet, always a little apart, and when the tomb was prepared for the king, the scribe requested to be part of the burial procession. He said nothing, carried no gold, only one scroll tucked beneath his robe, not written in the language of gods or mortals, but in something older, a language of breath, of shadow, of grief. He placed the scroll beneath the head of the dead pharaoh, just before the mask was sealed. They say he whispered something then, not a spell, not a farewell, just the name, the true name, the one no one else had known. Afterward, the scribe was never seen again, but in time, rumors bloomed like ghost flowers in the sand, of a tomb dug far from the city, a tomb carved by a single pair of hands. Inside it, not jewels or statues, but words, thousands of them. A chamber wrapped in stories. No one could find it. Some said the desert swallowed it. Others said it moved, that the sands shifted around it like a tide, always hiding its mouth. But once, and only once, a wanderer found it. A blind man, guided by dreams. He said the entrance was sealed by silence, that he did not see it, but heard it. A hymn beneath the ground, like ink drying on parchment. He placed his ear to the stone and heard a voice. Soft, steady, weeping. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with blue ink. There were no bodies, only script, written in long looping strokes. It told the story of the scribe and the king, of eyes that met across firelight, of silence shared at the edge of a throne, of a love that asked for nothing but to remain near. And beneath the final lines, one symbol repeated, over and over, a single feather, the sign of truth. The blind man did not disturb it. He left a stone at the entrance and walked back into the desert. But he said the words followed him, that sometimes, in sleep, he could still hear the voice reading softly in the dark, that the scribe had not been buried. He had become the tomb itself. And even now, when the night wind curls along the dunes, there are those who say the sand speaks in syllables, that if you are very quiet, you may hear the turning of pages where no book lies. So remember, some love is not lost, only hidden, carved into stone beneath a red hill, written not in ink, but in silence. And it waits still for someone to listen. But the mists hold another tale. They say a name is a kind of anchor, that to name a thing is to bind it, and that to be named is to be held by the world. But what of those who choose to be forgotten? What of the ones who step away from their names, not in shame, but in mystery? Have you ever stood before a mirror and wondered if it was looking back, not at your face, but at your memory? There was once a queen whose name no longer exists, not because time wore it away, but because she removed it herself. Her story lives in the whisper of polished stone, in a temple where nothing was written, but everything was reflected. Far beyond the reach of caravans, where the dunes melt into sky, there is said to be a temple made entirely of smooth black stone. From afar it looks like a pool of still water, rising from the sand. From within, it reflects not only the stars above, but also what lies within the heart. This was the Mirror Temple, and she, the queen who ruled it, was never named, at least, not aloud. The temple was not built for gods, nor kings. It was built for her alone, an offering to silence, to vision, to the thing deeper than language. It is said she walked barefoot across the polished stone, never once speaking to her subjects. Her face was always half-veiled, her eyes painted with crushed coal and starlight. She ruled not with decree but with stillness. People came to her court to gaze upon their own reflections in the mirrored walls, and there many wept. Some fled. A few never returned, because in that place nothing could be hidden. Your deepest memory, your forgotten sorrow, your hidden cruelty, it rose like steam from the stone, reflected in silence. And in the center of the temple, a single obsidian mirror stood taller than any man. Carved into its edges were hundreds of eyes, some open, some closed, some weeping. It was said the queen came to this mirror each morning before dawn, placing her hand upon the cold surface, and there she would stare, not at her own face, but into something deeper, as if the mirror opened into another time. One day she summoned the builders, and ordered that her name be removed from every inscription, from scrolls, from walls, from the memories of priests, even from her own tomb, which had already been carved and sealed. When they asked why, she said only, "I am not mine to remember," and that was all. It is said that in her youth, before the temple was built, she bore a child in secret, a child not born of marriage or royal right, but of something else, perhaps a dream or a desert vision. The child lived only a few days. No one ever knew his name, but the queen never spoke again after his passing. She wore white for the rest of her life. She slept beside the mirror, and each night, it is said, she whispered lullabies into the glass. What did she see in that mirror, truly? Was it her son's face, her own sorrow, or something older still? A wound passed down from the first mother to the last. Years passed, The queen grew thin, then translucent, then nearly forgotten. New kings ruled faraway cities. The temple faded from memory, its black stone cracked in the desert heat. The mirror remained, untouched. One final story is told. A traveler once found the temple, a young woman fleeing a storm that tore the sky with gold. She stepped into the mirrored halls and was met with silence. Her torch reflected 1,000 times upon the black walls, and in the center, she saw the mirror. As she approached, she noticed a figure within it, a woman, veiled in light, standing still, her eyes wide, not looking at the traveler, but through her. The woman reached out a hand. The traveler reached back, but instead of cold glass, she touched water. The mirror rippled. The queen was gone. In her place, a name was spoken, but not aloud, only in the heart. The traveler never told anyone what she heard, but she left the temple barefoot and walked the rest of her life in silence. It is said she became a healer, that she spoke only with her hands, that when people asked her name, she would press a mirror into their palm and simply smile. So now, when you close your eyes tonight, and the dark feels smooth and still, you may find yourself standing in that temple. You may place your hand upon the wall and feel a breath beneath it, not stone, but memory, a memory too sacred to be spoken. And you may wonder, as she once did, who am I, without the name they gave me? Who waits in the mirror when I finally stop looking? And further still, there is one more story. Have you ever held something small in your hand and felt the weight of something vast behind it? A shell, a pebble, a coin, but with it, a hush, as if the wind itself paused to listen. They are objects so quiet, so still, that they seem to breathe when touched. Not with life, but with warning. One such thing lies beneath the salt-rich sands of the southern tombs. They call it the 13th scarab. It was never meant to be found. It was never meant to be made. The desert winds say the same thing over and over, in a tongue without words. Not this one. Not this one. Not this one. In the days when sacred beetles were carved for the dead, each high priest commissioned 12 scarabs to guard the spirit of the tomb. One for each direction, one for each hour of night, one for each breath the body might still take beyond the veil. But once, only once, a 13th was made. It gleamed brighter than the rest. It hummed softly, even in silence, and those who stood near it felt the oddest sensation, as though someone behind them was just about to speak their name. This is the story of the man who carved it. He was a stone worker's son, born during a season of floods. His name was Amanek. He grew up in the shadow of temples, where gold gleamed in shadowed alcoves, and prayers curled upward in blue smoke. His hands were delicate, sensitive, able to feel the breath of the stone, the tension beneath the grain. By the time he reached his 17th summer, his carvings were spoken of with awe. But Amanek was not content with beauty. He wanted to carve something that remembered. He believed stone could hold not only shape, but sorrow. And so, when the chief mortuary priest came to him with a commission for 12 sacred scarabs, Amanek agreed on one condition. He would be permitted to carve one more, in secret. A private offering. A third. The priest, amused, agreed. Make it unseen, he said. Make it never speak. But Amanek had already heard the scarab's voice, not in words, but in a dream. He dreamed of a woman standing at the edge of a black river, holding a child swaddled in linen. She was not crying. She was singing, a sound that bent the air itself. When he woke, his hands were trembling, and he carved the 13th scarab before dawn. Not of turquoise or onyx, like the others, but of saltstone and shadowed glass. He etched it with names never spoken aloud. He placed a single red thread beneath its belly, drawn from a funeral shroud he had found in the temple ruins, and when he finished, he placed the scarab in a hollow beneath the tomb floor, sealed by a single sigh. The burial went as planned. The priests spoke their words. The dead were sealed with gold. But that night, the scarabs began to hum. Not all at once, just the 13th. A soft vibration, like the memory of a heartbeat. Amenek came to the tomb alone. He listened, and beneath the stone floor, he heard something breathing. The priest, alerted by temple guards, confronted Amenek. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice echoing in the antechamber. Amenek did not answer. He only held up the palm of his hand. A thin red line had appeared across it, as though the scarab had marked him. From that night onward, nothing grew in the sands near the tomb. Birds did not fly over it, wind circled around, but did not enter. The 13th scarab was still, but people who passed nearby reported strange dreams, of a river with no banks, of a song, sung in reverse, of a beetle made of blood and silence, crawling across the stars. The priests called it a curse. They demanded the tomb be unsealed, but when they opened it, the scarabs were gone. All 12 vanished. Only one remained. The 13th, still humming, still warm. The high priest, in desperation, cast it into a pit lined with black salt and buried it beneath a mound of crushed bone. The temple was abandoned. Amenek disappeared, and the story was whispered only among the dying. But centuries passed, and the desert, as always, forgot, until a child, chasing a beetle across the dunes, stumbled into a hollow where no light lived. She returned with a stone in her hand, small, glossy, with a red thread etched into its back. She did not speak for many days, only hum, a low, rhythmic sound that made the elders uneasy. They say that night a sandstorm swallowed the village, and when the winds cleared, no one remained, only the child, sitting in the sand, with 13 scarabs arranged around her feet. No one knows what happened to Amenek. Some say he was taken by the spirit of the stone. Others believe he carved himself into the scarab, offering his soul to keep the sorrow from waking. But they say that when the moon is red, the 13th scarab glows faintly, and if you place it in your palm, it begins to hum again, not in warning, not in curse, but in mourning, for it is not evil that was carved into its shape. It was a song, a lullaby, a memory too fragile for the world. Amenek had not meant to bring a curse. He had meant to give a sorrow a place to rest. And now, it rests in silence, waiting. So if one day you wake and find a beetle at your window, still and glimmering with red light, do not swat it away. Open the window, let it in, and listen. It has come to sing. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever stood in a place where the wind no longer speaks, where even your own footsteps sound uncertain, where the silence is not just an absence, but a presence, watching, listening, waiting? There is such a place in the southern sands of Egypt, a stretch of desert known only by its hush. No maps mark it, no caravan dares to cross it. They say once, long ago, before the Nile dreamed of kingdoms, before the gods had names, there stood a city with no walls, built from memory and sound. Its name has been forgotten, not because it faded, but because it was erased from every tongue. They called it, only in whisper, the City of Voices. It is said the city rose not from stone or straw, but from breath. Every building sang, every arch hummed, even the streets whispered when walked upon. There were no scrolls in the city, no libraries, no carvings on the wall, because the people remembered everything through the voice. Mothers sang their children's names into them. Lovers kept one another alive by reciting old laughter. Even the laws were spoken each morning, so they would remain fresh and tender. But all things, even songs, can be undone. The city was ruled not by a king, but by a chorus. 7 elders, each chosen for the beauty of their remembering. One of them, the youngest, was called Nefereset. Her voice was unlike any other, clear as water, soft as sleep. It was said she could speak a word once, and it would linger in the air for days. People came from beyond the dune just to hear her say hello. But Nefereset was troubled. She had begun to forget her dreams. Each morning, her song weakened, her voice faltered. She claimed there was something beneath the city, something older than the songs, something waiting. The others did not listen. Nothing waits beneath us. They said, we are the sound, and we are safe. But Neferset had heard something. One night, when the moon failed to rise, she had walked to the center of the city and laid her ear to the stone. And there, beneath all the singing, beneath all the whispers, she heard a breath, not her own, not the wind's, but something deeper, slow, hungry. She began to hum against it, as if to keep it from waking. But it was already stirring. And then it happened. No one knows exactly how. Only that one morning, when the sun rose over the dunes, the city of voices was silent, gone. Not in ruin, not in ash, just gone. The sand was smooth as bone. No sound remained. Even the wind refused to pass. A single traveler, following the stars, walked into the stillness and saw nothing. No stones, no walls, no footprints. But when he placed his hand on the ground, he felt a vibration, a low, slow hum. He pressed his ear to the sand and heard voices, not one, not a dozen, thousands, all speaking at once, all speaking different words, laughter, grief, greetings, prayers, names, but none could be understood, as if the songs had been broken and scattered to the wind. The traveler fled, but even he could not escape. For the next 7 nights, he dreamed of Neferset. She stood in a chamber of red stone, far below the surface. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She held a thread of golden light, which she wrapped around her own throat. And in the final dream, she looked at him and mouthed, "Speak me, or I will vanish." The man woke with no voice. He never spoke again, but each morning, he drew shapes in the sand, circles, waves, lines that looked like breath. Others began to listen, and though they could not explain why, they understood him, and slowly, they began to remember something they'd never learned, a lullaby, or a name, or the echo of a laugh they never knew. They say the city of voices was not destroyed. It was swallowed. Not by sand, but by forgetting, and that now it lives in the places between speech, in the breath before a story begins, in the hush between notes of music, in the pause before saying I love you. There is no curse on that place, only memory too wide to hold, only the weight of sound, collapsed beneath its own beauty. But the desert remembers, and when the moon is thin, and the stars sharp, some travelers say they've heard the wind speak their names, in voices not their own. And if you listen very carefully, you might hear Neferset humming just beneath your thoughts, a tune you cannot place, but have always known. And if that song stirs something in you, a sadness, a warmth, a word you forgot, you once loved, say it aloud, softly, gently. Let the desert hear you. Let the city know it is still remembered. Let Neferset's voice rise one note closer to the surface. Let us now turn to a deeper shadow. Still, have you ever heard footsteps in a tomb when no one else is near? Not loud, just the hush of bare soles on ancient stone, the breath of linen brushing the air. There are those who walk where the living do not, and they do so without fear, because they were chosen, not by men, but by the dead. This is the story of a woman who was never meant to rule, yet wore a crown that no queen dared touch. Not gold, not jewels, but bone, white as milk, silent as sleep. They called her Ankayet, though even that name feels like an echo. Half remembered, she was born under a moonless sky, in a village too poor for priests to visit. Her mother was a washer of linen for the dead. Her father long returned to the earth. Even as a child, Ankayet did not cry. Instead, she listened. She listened to the wind as it passed through canyons of stone. She listened to the river as it recited names into the night. And most of all, she listened at the edge of the necropolis, where the voices of the embalmed whispered from the sand. The elders feared her. She walks too quietly, they said. She hears what she should not. But the high priests, those who served in the Valley of Silence, where the most sacred dead were placed, noticed her. They brought her to the house of Anpu, god of mummification, the jackal-headed guide of souls. There, she was trained, not as a mourner, not as a priestess, but as something far older, a listener of the dead. She learned to read breath in bones, to trace sorrow through the curve of a rib, to hear the dreams left clinging to a skull. They say her fingers glowed faintly in the dark, that the linen she touched never rotted, that the jackals of the desert followed, not out of hunger, but reverence. But the land was changing. A new pharaoh had taken the throne, young, afraid, obsessed with power. He demanded temples in his name, statues that reached the sun, and tombs more vast than kingdoms. He feared death more than anything, and so he sent for Ankayet. "Make me safe," he said, "when the gods come for me." But Ankayet did not bow. She touched the stone floor with her hand and whispered something. The king could not hear. Later that night, the palace guards claimed they saw a jackal seated at the edge of the throne room, watching. Its eyes were the color of old copper. It did not blink. 3 days later, the pharaoh was dead. No wound, no poison, just silence. His body had turned cold. His breath had stopped, and no one could explain how. Some said it was a curse. Others called it judgment. But the priests knew. They came to Ankayet, not in anger, but in awe, for they had seen what she wore the night she returned to the necropolis. A circlet of carved bone, each piece shaped from a different part of the body. Skull, spine, wrist, rib. It was not morbid. It was beautiful, and it sang softly in the moonlight. The crown of the silent. It had not been made by hands. It had been given. And she, the girl once feared, now walked as its keeper. They called her the jackal's bride, not because she married a god, but because she walked beside death, as if it were her companion. She did not claim the throne. She did not enter the temples. She did not speak to the living. Instead, she entered the tombs one by one, and listened to the warriors who still dreamed of battles, to the queens who missed their children, to the farmers who longed for rain. She whispered prayers in languages no one knew. She wrapped the dead in lullabies. She placed a single white feather beside each heart, not the feather of Maat, but one older, from the wing of silence itself. And in time, the valley changed. The winds grew gentler. The stones grew warm. The dead began to sleep, not all at once, but slowly, like a field falling into evening. Only once did she weep. It was said she found a child's tomb, forgotten, untouched. The little body still clutched a wooden lion in its arms, and Ankayet sat beside the sarcophagus for 3 days. She did not eat. She did not speak. But the wind stopped blowing in the valley. The stars gathered close, and a faint singing was heard from beneath the earth. Afterward, she placed the bone crown beside the child's head and walked barefoot into the night. She was not seen again. But in the centuries that followed, the tombs remained undisturbed. Not because they were guarded, but because none dared disturb the one who walked with the dead. Even now, they say, if a grave is robbed, or a tomb cracked open for greed, the jackals return. and in their eyes something glimmers, not hunger, but memory. And Kayet walks still, it is said, barefoot, crowned only by night, trailing veils made of breath and dusk. Not a queen, not a goddess, only a witness, only the one who listens. And if you are very quiet, on a windless night, and sleep with your ear to the earth, you may hear her voice, not in words, not in warning, but in welcome. For the dead do not fear her, and the living who remember her fear death a little less, and the veil lifts once more. Have you ever felt the earth breathe? Not wind, not shifting dunes, but a breath, slow and hollow, rising from the deep beneath your feet, as if something ancient stirred far below, in slumber, older than the stars. There are places where the sand does not rest, where it ripples though no wind moves, where birds will not cross the sky, and even the sun dims, as if uncertain it should shine there. This is the story of one such place, where no cartographer dares draw lines, and no name remains, only a hush. They say it lies between two vanished rivers, beyond the reach of Nile or moon, where the horizon seems to tremble, and compasses forget their purpose. The elders once called it Sahetep, though even that is lost to most. Its meaning has crumbled like stone. The place of waiting. No ruins remain, no temple walls or broken lintels, just sand and silence. But the desert remembers. Beneath that endless dune field, something breathes, something listens, something waits. It begins, as most stories do, with a wanderer. Her name was Teaman, a pilgrim of no fixed shrine, neither priestess nor scholar, but a seeker. She carried a staff carved with spiral notches, a jug of shadow water, drawn from a moonlit well, and a scrap of parchment, on which nothing had been written, only pressed, as if a feather had touched it and vanished. She did not speak of her past. She walked as if following echoes, and always toward the place no one else would go. Some said she was mad, others cursed, but those with wisdom in their bones knew better. She walks toward the waiting one, they whispered. It was said that in the age before kings, before tombs bore names, there was a being not born, but shaped from hush, neither god nor ghost, not alive, not dead, a spirit woven from the first silence after the first word, a creature without eyes, yet who sees only truth, a judge of souls, but not in cruelty, in stillness. They called it by no name, for to name it would be to awaken it. But the scribes in secret wrote a glyph no one dared speak aloud. Rudder, a symbol of water without shore, of darkness without malice, of time curled like a sleeping serpent. Tiamun had seen that glyph once, on the underside of a stone, washed clean by the flood. And from that moment, she walked. Her path was long. It took her past forgotten oases, where no reeds grew, through valleys of ash, where whispers filled the air. Like dust, she left offerings in the footprints of jackals. She drank only when the stars blinked twice, and she slept always with her back to the wind. At last, she reached Sahetep. No sign marked the place, only stillness, not the stillness of peace, but of watching. She knelt and pressed her hand to the sand, and the sand exhaled. The breath was not warm or cold. It was knowing. She whispered nothing. She simply listened. And then, the ground fell open beneath her feet. No scream, no sound, just a slow, soft descent into a chamber not carved, but formed, as if the earth had opened its palm to cradle her. There were no walls, no ceiling, only darkness thick as memory, and lightless shapes, hovering just beyond the eye's reach. She stood still for what may have been hours or centuries. Time had unraveled, and then a voice, not spoken, not even thought, but remembered from a life she had not lived. It said, "Why have you come?" She did not answer in words. She laid the parchment at her feet, and from the jug poured a single drop of water onto its blank face. The parchment did not soak. Instead, the water curled into glyphs, fluid, golden, unreadable, until the sheet became a mirror, reflecting not Tiamon's face, but her silence, and the voice returned. You remember the first pause, and in her heart, Tiamon wept, not in sorrow, but in the ache of being known, too deeply to remain unchanged. Then came the story, told without sound, woven into her breath, into the pulse behind her ribs. She was shown the first forgetting, how the gods once fell silent, after giving language to mortals, how silence became a being of its own, how it waited in the sand, for someone who would not try to name it, but to understand. Tiamon was not there to awaken. She was there to remember, and so she did. She touched the air before her, and a shape emerged, the form of the waiting one. No face, only folds of night, and eyes made of memory. It reached toward her, not with hands, but with stillness, and she leaned forward. Their foreheads met, flesh and shadow, breath and hush. In that moment, she saw every tomb, every whisper, every curse and blessing, each breath stolen by sand, each name lost and mourned, all of it held in the cradle of the one who waits. And then she was outside again, standing at the edge of Sahetep, the sky new with dawn, the sand untouched, but something had changed. In her hand, the parchment had become a black feather, soft as dusk, warm as breath, and where she stepped, no footprints remained. She walked back into the world, but not as before. Now, silence followed her, not emptiness, but presence, and wherever she whispered a name, that name would be remembered, even if no stone bore it. Children who met her felt calm. Animals bowed their heads, and the dying, they smile. They say she still walks, and when the sand breathes, she listens. And if the stars blink twice in the desert sky, it means she has passed by. In the hush between wind and dawn, some say she never left the chamber, that all who meet her meet only a memory, cast outward by the one who waits. But it does not matter, for the veil has parted, and the silence speaks, and the mist, they still hold one more story. They found it deep beneath the limestone cliffs of the Theban necropolis, a burial chamber so hidden, even the tomb robbers had missed it. It wasn't listed in any scroll. Its entrance was sealed not with stone, but with a door of gold coated in dust, so ancient it no longer shimmered. Those who first touched it said the air grew thick in their lungs, as if the tomb itself was holding its breath. And above the door, carved so finely the chisel marks had vanished, was a single. It was not the eye of Horus, not the all-seeing sun or moon. This was something else, an unblinking eye, staring with such delicate symmetry that one explorer said it felt more alive than we did. They hesitated. They should have left, but wonder is a stronger force than fear. So they entered, and the moment the threshold was crossed, every torch went dim, not extinguished, only dulled, as if the light was being politely swallowed. Inside, walls of polished black basalt, etched with lines so fine they looked like veins. The chamber was round, as if carved by a spinning god, and at its center, a sarcophagus of pure gold, unmarked, unadorned, except for the eyes. There were 23 of them, each one unique, each carved into the surface with impossible realism. Not inset gems, not painted reliefs, but golden eyes that watched. Some were almond-shaped, others round, a few so narrow they looked like slits in stone, and all of them faced outward. No name was found, no cartouche, no inscription, only a feeling that whoever lay within had no need of words, that their gaze alone was curse enough. The team that discovered the tomb was led by Amal Selim, an Egyptologist who had studied forgotten dynasties. She was cautious, not prone to superstition, but even she admitted later that the air in that room hummed with thought. They did not open the sarcophagus. Not yet. Instead, they studied. For weeks, they mapped the chamber, sketched the eyes, measured the pulse of heat that seemed to rise from the stone. Then came the dreams. Not nightmares. Worse, each member of the team began to see the eyes in mirrors, in puddles, in the reflection of their own spectacles, and always, just as they blinked, each claimed the same feeling. I wasn't alone inside my own face. Still, curiosity pressed forward, and so Amal Selim authorized the opening of the coffin. They did it at sunrise, when the sky was brightest, as if daylight could protect them. They lifted the lid. Inside, the human form, entirely wrapped in linen, blackened not by rot, but by ink. The linen had been written on, thousands upon thousands of lines, in a script none could decipher. Not demotic, not hieratic, something older, and where the face should be, only a golden mask. But unlike Tutankhamun's, this one bore no features, just an eye, singular, enormous, stretching from brow to chin. And when they stared into it, it stared back. The assistant who first saw it fainted. Another became violently ill. Amal simply wept, not in fear, but in recognition. She later wrote, "I saw myself not as I am, but as I have always been watched." They removed the mask, and beneath, no skull, no flesh, only a hollow void, a concavity as smooth as glass, stretching backward into impossible depth. It was as if the head had been carved away to make space for something else. And then the whispering began. First in the recordings, then the equipment failed. Cameras refused to capture the figure. Photographs came back blurred, even when pointed at the walls. One worker swore the mask turned slightly each night. Another found the golden door closed one morning, though no one had moved it. And finally, Amal disappeared. Her journal was left open on her cot, pages fluttering in the still air. The last words written, "I think I understand. The curse is not punishment. It is memory, and it is watching us to see if we have forgotten who we are." She was never found. Since then, the tomb has been sealed again, not with gold, but with salt, and sealed in silence. But some say the eye appears elsewhere, carved suddenly into old walls, drawn in the frost on a windshield, reflected in the pupil of a sleeping dog, and always, when the world is about to forget something important. What did the mask see? What had the golden gaze recorded? And who was buried in that formless face? Some believe the body was never human, that it was a vessel, a mirror, a kind of oracle, not of the future, but of forgotten truths, the kind that erode over centuries, but still echo in us, that we are not alone in ourselves, that we have always been watched, not by gods, but by the memory of what we could have become, and what we chose to forget. The golden eye sleeps now, but if you feel your reflection linger after you've turned away from the glass, if you feel your breath tighten in a museum hallway, or hear a whisper beneath the sound of sand shifting in wind, remember, the curse is not vengeful. It is waiting for you to remember, for someone to see it and not blink.